for today is basically about the best strategies to make better decisions when choosing innovation and tech in teams. So I'm going to ask the panelists to come on stage. So Pierre Barrieux, Marco Nunez, Massa, and then Carlos. And I'm going to give you guys some, you got microphone? Make sure it's turned on. So before we begin, I'm going to ask each of the speakers to introduce themselves. Yeah, should be working now. So Pierre, you want to go first?
Sure. Do you have an option? Hi, my name is Pierre Barrieux. I've been high performance director in the field of soccer or football, however you want to call it, for the last 25 years. In the Premier League, in MLS, with different clubs. And I'm also an instructor and a technical advisor for FIFA.
Thank you, Pierre.
Hey everybody, my name is Dr. Marco Nunez. I am what I guess we call a performance athletic trainer. I spent 12 years specifically in NBA with one of the direct sports business in the last 3 years with the LA Lakers. I've been in the professional setting for about 25 years now. I have my own practice. I work with private clients, with athletes, weekend warriors, and celebrities out in Southern California. I do what I guess what you would call concierge, ATC concierge rehab.
Yeah, thank you, Marco. Massa?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Massa. I'm co-founder and CEO of Uplift. Prior to Uplift, I was very fortunate to have helped launch category-defining products like the iPad at Apple and then the Model S at Tesla in Japan. And I think I'm the only vendor here on this panel, but we're very excited to unlock biomechanics for everybody and athletes at all skill levels, just using your iPhones, iPads, as well as broadcast footage at our company, Uplift.
And I think about a third of the MLB team use your product today, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. Carlos?
Good morning. I'm Carlos Del Barrio. I started as a physical therapist in Atlético Madrid in my club. Then I became more into the performance part as a strength and conditioning, and I've been developing the sports science department from the scratch. This is my 9th season in the club, and apart from that, I'm also a university lecturer in the CEU San Pablo University in Madrid. And well, it's a pleasure being here with you.
Yeah, but thank you guys all for coming. So, I think when it comes to technologies, based on my experience, right, I think typically teams get almost bombarded by technologies. The vendors reach out to them all the time. And so, my first question to the panelists would be, what are the challenges that you guys have seen, right, when trying to adopt technologies within the teams? And I'll give you my quick take, but from what I've seen sometimes is that vendors don't understand the workflow of how technology should be used by the teams daily. Sometimes technology could be just too expensive. Sometimes they're not building the right technologies, and so on. So anybody wants to start with these questions as far as what challenges have you guys faced or you've seen when trying to adopt technologies within the teams?
I'll go first.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest challenges that I've seen among all teams, whether it's professional, collegiate level, or even high school level, is that whole theory about the grass is greener on the other side. Or when you see a team that uses a specific technology and they just won the World Cup, or they just won the Super Bowl, or they just won the NBA Finals, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's the recipe. We need to get that kind of technology type thing. And I think that's one of the biggest things a lot of these teams kind of challenges, that they immediately kind of go gravitate to that thing. So that's what they use. We need to go ahead and use it. But without actually looking within inside the team and finding out, okay, what do we actually need? What are issues? What are injuries? What are complications? What's chronic and acute? And try to find, kind of see what suits you, helps you, versus just trying to find something and then trying to force it into or implement it into your program. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that I've noticed a lot of teams tend to do.
Well, one of the other things I've seen, and I'd love to get your guys' take, is I was talking to an NBA team about a month ago, and the VP of performance told me, look, I've got like 5 GMs in the last 10 years. And every 2 years, a new GM comes in, and he said, look, we don't need this and this and this technology, right? So that's another problem, right? With this new management, new GM, that's another issue, right?
I mean, the beauty of this panel is we can build on each other. It's much better than presentation, I think. So, on what Marco just said, I've worked in NCAA, I've worked in professional clubs. I think what Marco just said applied even more in the NCAA. I've seen a lot of keeping up with the Joneses type of philosophies, depending on colleges, because it becomes a recruiting tool. Oh, you want to go to this? No, we're doing the same. Look, we have this and we have that. They don't have this and they want that. So I was marked by this when I was at Virginia, when I first discovered this. At the professional level, what Julien said is also true, meaning when you're a high performance director, you go to a club, you're the new guy, brought maybe by the GM, and then you do the audit, and then you realize that in at least 2 clubs that I've been part of in the US, there was like a traffic jam of technologies because the GM, actually not even the practitioners were bringing the technologies because they've heard that the team is doing it, not knowing anything about the tech. So these are the challenges when you arrive in a club, and then when you are the one making decisions, this is where you will be particularly thorough, and this is why this type of events are useful, because for me, personally, I try to test the tech that I can test on myself. Anytime it's possible, I'm doing it. I'm wearing a few patches today that are available there. And then you make your own decision. Obviously, you have colleagues, you get this type of event, you talk to people. But the last reason to adopt the technology should be that because it's being done somewhere else. I'm going to give you another example. In a week, I'll be talking in South Korea for the South Korean Federation. They want to build a high-performance department. And the first slide I have in presentation is, why would you need one? And my first answer would be, well, because the other one do. I want to see their reaction. Because it's also accepted, because they do. Sometimes they're doing it, we have to do it, which is the last thing you don't want to go about.
And by the way, I think people call it sometimes the fear of missing out, right? FOMA, because all those guys are using it. Doesn't mean it's the best technology out there, but just because they feel like, oh, we gotta get this, right?
Yeah, I think building upon what you've said from sort of the vendor perspective, if you will, I think, Julian, in the very beginning, you nailed it. Workflow is absolutely key. We want to understand who's actually going to be using the technology on a daily basis. Do you have such a champion? At the same time, because I imagine with this forum, it's very data analytics heavy. So do you have the right people at the team or at the league who can run all the kind of the background analysis, the data? And is there a person who can actually help translate that back to the coaches? Because in the end of the day, it's either, as you said, Dr. Marcus, keeping your players more injury-free or helping with player development. So you want to see that translated into actual results. So is that chain, all there? Is that intact? And I would say just another quick one is about the FOMO comment, the grass is greener comment. The more success that we've seen that our technologies usually deployed is when there was any of those people that I just mentioned, those stakeholders, that they were actually trying to tackle some kind of problem using some kind of technology, previous to maybe using yours. So then it's actually very real, and it's a real acute problem that they're trying to solve, then something that might be more of a novel experimentation.
Yeah, another thing I've heard, from example, from NBA executive is sometimes they'll adopt technologies, but the departments don't always communicate with each other, and they don't communicate back why, what are the measurements, what are the benefits of using the technology. So then at the end of the day, when it's a tech audit, people are like, why do we need this? Because nobody knows, right? So Carlos, what's your take on that too?
For me, one of the problems is that right now, data and tech is kind of in between a lot of departments. And for example, my point of view that I'm a sports scientist, I have to make the decision of the technology, and it's going to affect not just my department, but other departments. And I believe it's one of the most difficult things, that technology doesn't have to resolve what I want to. It's what they need. The strength conditioning coach, the player, even the coach. And sometimes the technology is not flexible enough, because I believe, at least what I know, football is super individual. Not just because of the players, but also because of the staff. And when the strength conditioning coach wants something very, very specific, if it's not that way, he's going to change it to another technology or whatever thing that he knows. So I believe that we need to build like sustainable, in a long-term perspective, tech environment. And for example, in our club, we are doing it through the medical service because it's something much more stable than the performance staff. It goes slower because we are not that powerful, but it allows to create a culture around data and around technology, and then people can adapt to it and not the other way, because as Pierre said, you're always changing, and it doesn't make sense because data and technology, I believe it pays off in the long run and not just in the short run.
Yeah, go ahead, Marco.
Just, I guess, also to add to what Pierre mentioned. So when I consult for companies or teams, and I go in there to kind of develop their sports science or sport performance, just like Pierre mentioned, one of the questions is why do you need it? Are the questions I ask. And so what I try to do is try to kind of look inside them first, versus kind of trying to find the companies. One, why do you need it? What's your budget? What's your staff? Do you have a staff to manage whatever you're going to decide? And one of the questions that I also realized, and it's kind of different from team to team, whether it's in the United States, whether it's in Europe, anything like that, is player compliance. NBA has different player, NBA has different rules for player compliance, NFL has different rules. So at the end of the day, also you got to determine whether player compliance is going to be able to allow you to be able to keep track of the data.
Yeah, the question was about challenges
Yes.
earlier. Yeah, I think the compliance is not a challenge. It's probably a reason why you would adapt the technology or not, because you have to know your group, you have to know your players. Carlos said they're a bunch of individuals, they are. So there are also different needs, because this guy would need a technology that this other guy wouldn't. So these are the factors that you have to integrate before you make all this decision. Going back to what Massa was saying, I think we're at the point now where technology is helping technology, meaning we can have, when you have a brand new technology, obviously it evolves. As a director, you have to be a resource, but you're not the expert in every area. So you need to have experts. Now we're at the point where we can have remote experts, which is a key factor also in the decision. Back then, you have a technology and then you have to be knowing everything about it, which is not possible nowadays because it goes exponentially. So that's also very interesting because it would cut somehow on professional development budgets. You don't have to go to all these places to learn so much. So these are all the challenges. Really, you can add these to the list when it comes time to adding technology.
Which brings the next question, right? So, from your perspective, what are the best practices to successfully adopt technologies within a team? So, from my perspective, like we talked about communication, right? Make sure to define what are the goals, right? And then, because once you know the goals, right, it's easier to pick and choose the right technologies, and maybe also communication, right? Educate people, the coach, the performance staff, medical staff, right? We've got this new technology that communicate the results that you're getting. Maybe kind of train or give feedback, right, to the vendors. Hey, you know what? You need to change the workflow a little bit, or you want this feature and so on. I mean, one of the reasons why we built this upside scouting platform is, we know the teams are talking to each other about, hey, we're using this and this, but we surveyed 200 teams to really get objective survey data from teams, completely objective, right? On what tech they use, the price they pay, the ratings, so that way they can rely on that objectively to make their own decision. We're not here to tell them go with this vendor, but that's just another data point, right? So what are your take on, what are the best practices?
Yeah, I believe I agree with your point about communication, but usually in the clubs, people are not going to tell you that they don't understand what you're saying. They're just going to take it away. So I believe we need to make it very, very accessible, the data, the technology, because I believe we would be all very, very surprised that there is a great lack of knowledge in sports, in teams. But we never say that because we have like a big name behind us, so it seems like we know a lot of things, and sometimes it's just the opposite. So for example, for us, data visualization has been a game changer, because of course we have all the numbers, all the fancy stuff, but at the end of the day we have this red, yellow, green light that it's very easy to read for any player, any coach, and for us it's been a great change because we all speak the same language, and I believe if we create this ecosystem, it's much easier to communicate, as Julian said.
So again, just touching on what you mentioned, communication. But the one thing I've also noticed is not just the communication itself, but it's the flow of communication. Meaning who's doing what, who's going to communicate with the coaches, who's communicating with the GM, when are you meeting, stuff like that. So laying out a plan as far as who's doing what they're doing, when they're meeting, who's communicating to what. So it's also the flow of communication is kind of key, not just communicating.
Yeah. So Marco, when you were with the Lakers, how many times a week were you guys having those types of conversation?
Daily.
Daily?
Yeah, we would meet daily with our analytics people. We would meet daily with our coaches. We daily with our GMs and our staff.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, I think for me, best practice is a common language, that easily understood by everybody. Now, how do you put it in place? This is the biggest challenge. This is where, obviously, the organizations all have different flows, and this is the challenge of someone who's overseeing, a performance department. Because you got to be able to talk to the coach, you got to be able to talk to the GM, you got to be able to talk to you people part of the department, talk to the players, and these are like 4 different types of communications. But the common ground, the base of the pyramid should be that these 4 groups, 5 groups, 6 groups, whatever, have a common language easily understood, which when it comes to science is not easy to achieve.
So I know, Pierre, when you were with the Toronto FC, right, you had maybe like 15 staff members across different departments. I can imagine how difficult that is, right? Do you manage that day to day?
No, it's not that difficult, because again, that common language is common sense within that group, and then also you're building the department. So sometimes you're building the department based on these criteria.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge is for the people in that department to understand that a coach, a GM, a president don't have the same point of views and don't see the same topic from the same spectrum. And that's where you spend a lot of time on. Not so much within the dynamics of the department. That's actually the easiest thing to achieve.
Okay. Massa?
Yeah, again, kind of from the vendor perspective, or the, as we like to think, technology partner perspective, assuming, as everybody on the panel has mentioned, that the why is there, you have the endorsement from top management, you have the right stakeholders, you have actually a product that produces data in a prescriptive, insightful, useful way. Assuming you have all of that, one of the things that we've actually been doing, and we think of our peers who are doing it quite successfully, which is a little bit counterintuitive actually, from a startup's perspective, is we heavily over-index on onboarding. We want to make sure onboarding goes smoothly, successfully, even if it means sending people out, because we're kind of used to this day and age of Zooming, every day, and it's cost effective, sure, but man, it pays dividends to heavily over-index on onboarding to ensure everybody's on the same page and ensuring all the right stakeholders are there during that onboard. So it's a forcing function as well, I think, on the client or the team side to ensure all the right people are there during that, let's say, 1 hour, 2 hour, session during, session onboarding. So.
Yeah, thank you, Massa. Carlos, what's your take from the Atletico Madrid perspective?
Well, what we are trying to do is create this common environment. So we are building this department to try to close the gap, not just between the professional teams and under 19, under 18, but also to close the gap between the performance side of the club and the medical side in the club. Because sometimes we can be even kind of rivals. So what we are trying to build around technology and about data is this common ground, so we can build something together. So right now, I believe technology is becoming something much more to the clubs than just performance by itself. It's a common ground, the same language that we should all speak, because we don't have, like, with data, we are beyond opinions. So it's a good point to start. So I believe here that technology is becoming more and more important, at least for us. But even, as I said, not just in terms of performance, but in terms of building something big for the club. We are trying to do it around technology.
Yeah, thank you, Carlos. So now, from your perspective, I mean, you work with different clubs, you're working for clubs, and also from the vendor perspective. Can you tell us some like success stories when technology, right, was implemented successfully within the clubs?
Yeah, well, yeah, I would like to speak here because when I first started the department in the club, they wouldn't even consider data or technology as part of the club, of the team. It was a tough fight with the club, and I would say that the first time we made something meaningful in terms of data and technology was force plates, because again it was common ground with different departments, and it may sound crazy, but it took us like 3 years not just to take data, because I believe that's the beginning, like to take data, but to make decisions based on the data. It took us like, I believe, 3 years since we start taking data until we start making decisions based on data. So it's been a very long process in the club because we started from the very scratch. So yeah, sometimes it's surprising that the inside of the club, even in terms of technology. And I believe for you as a vendor, having someone from the inside, it could be very helpful. So for example, I don't like to name like any company, but for example, Kidman Labs, we don't work with Kidman Labs, but they hired Martin Boucher, and I believe it was a game changer for them in Europe, because it was a very familiar face with a lot of knowledge, and he speaks the same crazy language that all that are inside the clubs, and I believe it was key for Kidman Labs to develop in Europe.
So I got one. You know, it's good to talk about the success. It's much easier than the failures. So a recent one applied to technology in 2017. I'm in LA, and I'm thinking, going back to your first question. There was a need for me in the isometric space, and I said, okay, listen, we've come up with a few things, but I want the baseline of our guys. When it comes to integrating technologies, you want to look. One of the key of success, I think, before you even choose, is to find something that applies to different fields. So, strength and conditioning, the medical, the return to play. So if you have a tool that all these areas can use, then that helps the common language. And then compliance. So I have an assistant from Australia, and he said, hey, I know that guy in Australia. They come up with this machine, it tests isometric and stuff. So I called, and we had a Zoom, and I can tell he was bright. And then he came and he showed me that prototype. So Julian said we can name names. So it was Kangatech, that some of you know about, I'm sure. This competition since.
That was with the LAFC?
That was with the Galaxy.
Okay.
And then he came with a prototype, But even though I said, okay, I've seen a machine like this, okay, there is a need and stuff. But at some point he showed me, yeah, but it's linked to the iPad, and the players would come and click on it. And from the second I saw that screen, I pictured my guys, and I saw the compliance, and the chances for compliance were way up. Because it was 2017. If it was 22,000 in the national team, it wasn't the same, because it was not the same type of players we had. So then we were the first team in North America to actually use Kangatech. Now they're pretty much everywhere, and I arrived in the Premier League last year, and they already had 3 units at lead. So, but for me, it was filling the gap. There was a need for isometric. You can measure a lot of different movement. It's portable. It doesn't take much floor space. All the criteria that you have to go through in your checklist. But more than anything, I knew that this would be easily sellable to players, because guess what? They come. They're on their own, they click on the names, it's like, switching from the iPhone to their iPhones to other phones to the tablet, and then let's go, So it's weird that the biggest factor for me was, yeah, he's got a screen. Everything else is great, but he's got a screen because, it's going to work, and it's worked, and it's still working.
Yeah, and I know, more and more teams in the States, right, have been using Kangatech. I've seen them, and a lot of teams are using them, so. Anybody else wants to comment on the best practices? Yeah, Marco.
So kind of continuing on, when I took over as director of sports medicine, I wanted to implement a lot of biometrics. The question was, which one do we begin with? We were partnered up when I was with the Lakers. The NBA is partnered up with Gatorade, but the Lakers specifically were partnered up with Gatorade. So I asked GSSI to come in, and they came in with like 20 things we could do: saliva analysis, we could do sweat analysis, we could do blood analysis, all these type of things. And like talking about when I talk about player compliance, yes, there's a player compliance meeting.
Marco, you might want to put your microphone.
Oh, sorry. Player compliance meeting is the players are willing to go ahead and participate. One, like I said, different leagues there's different rules on the part. But not only that, but one of the things that I discovered is that for some reason half of the team that I had were scared of needles. So doing like a blood analysis, punctures, I was like out of the question, not just because they weren't compliant, just because they were scared of it. But the one we did go ahead and start was the sweat analysis, and there was a funny story. We had a player when we would travel every day as soon as we arrived. We'd play one game, we arrived to the very next day at 2 o'clock in the morning. I get them a knock on my door, It's like, Marco, I have a headache, I have a headache. They would just clockwork every single time we travel. And we had just done their sweat analysis. Well, when the results came in, we quickly discovered that this kid was actually already dehydrated even going before the game, and the headaches were to levels of low sodium, low potassium. Once we changed his hydration program, put him in the hydration program, his headaches kind of went away. Yes, I think eventually knocked on the door once because he had a headache, but that wasn't due to dehydration. It was something else.
Won't get into that. So, anybody else wants to comment on the best practices?
I think on the success note, failure is obviously the best teacher, and our early success actually kind of impinged us a little bit. And in this case, as you commented kindly, so today we work with a third of the MLB teams for mostly off-field and a little bit on-field hitting, pitching analysis. Again, all you need is sort of 2 iPhones or 2 iPads to get 3D biomechanical motion capture and analysis. But our stakeholders were mostly mechanists, right? They're sports performance directors, scientists. So they understand data, they live in data every day. And then when we were starting to extend our solutions into the, let's say, NCAA collegiate market or into the private practice sports academy market, we brought just the same dashboards, the same tool sets, and the number one thing that we kept on hearing is coaches are like, we don't understand how to read this data. We don't know what to do. I have no idea how to change up, my player's pitch mechanics. So, through that, again, understanding who you're communicating to, was a valuable lesson. And of course, from there, we partnered with a number of coaches and, kind of converted a lot of our data into more, coach speak, if you will, in terminology that they're used to in day-to-day practice. So, again, kind of thinking back, learning a little bit of just taking something from A and trying to apply it to B is definitely not the right blueprint.
All right, thank you, Mesa. Carlos?
Just one quick thought, adly for us in terms of successful implementation. We have like 2 things that are key. It's time with the player and effort that we ask the player. Sometimes 10 minutes with the player is a gift that we don't have. So sometimes, so for example, EMG, I have to discard EMG because there are many times that I don't have more than 5 minutes to see a player. And that's the truth because everyone wants to stay, if not 5, 10 or 15 minutes. So for what I try to do is just do the opposite. If it's, instead of 10 minutes I can be 5, it's better. And in terms of effort, and that's the thing about force plates are very quick, but it demands a big but short effort to the player. So the only way that we could make it work is with the leaderboard. Like every day they see who jumped the highest. So it's like a kind of a game between them. So that's the only way that we could solve that problem of asking an extra effort to the player. Because sometimes anything that's out of the field is an extra effort that they are not willing to do. So for us, like time and effort with the player are 2 keys for like better implementation.
Yeah, and that reminds me of Barcelona Football Club. I think I've heard that they built a mobile app that players like Messi at the time were using, but they were so competitive. They were all on it, but before that, they didn't want to use anything. So, quick question before we get to the last question. So, typically when you want to buy new technology, right? Is more of a question for I guess, even for you, Massa. Who's the decision maker? Is it the GM? Is it the head of performance? Who writes the check? That's my question to you guys.
Well, I mean, it's depending on your club, depending on the organization, the organizational chart stuff. You get a budget in a department, and then sometimes you can, if it doesn't fit in the budget, you have to convince other stakeholders.
Yeah.
So,
And also the different time of the year, right? Like the MLS, I would think it's probably between November up to March.
they close, I don't remember, it's been 2 years. But yeah, there are times where the excess money they have to spend or vice versa.
Makes sense.
Which is a big factor when you talk about implementation and so forth, is when do you introduce the new technology? For us, it's an obvious one. It has to be off-season and pre-season.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've seen teams like, for example, I remember talking to an NBA team, they were like, look, if we like it, we'll unlock the budget, even if it's during season. If it makes a difference for us to get more wins, we'll try to find a budget. But you're right, most of the time it's during the off season.
It's a fragile equilibrium, professional sports organization, so it's hard to not disrupt it by introducing, changes during the season.
Marco?
Yeah, like Pierre mentioned, every team is different. As far as staff members, who's in charge, who writes a check, type of thing. As far as implementing any new technology, the huge advance that we had in the NBA, we had the Las Vegas Summer League.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a perfect time for us to test drive implementing any type of technology that we wanted to see, and then if we like it, it looks good, then implement it in the preseason type thing. As far as budget, from what I recall, I'm not saying that we had like an unlimited budget. It was all something that we can justify to the stakeholders, the GM, and the owners. Then they were willing to pay for it.
Or they'll say, look, we'll put it on the budget for next year, on the list, and then when the time comes, we get the budget, we just put it on the list, we're going to buy it.
Yep.
Right?
The equivalent of the summer league for a soccer pro club would be the academy or the reserve team. Sometimes you can test it below
Oh, that's right.
and in advance, so it's like a lab.
Yeah.
In some sorts.
Good point. Carlos?
For us, it's like every single decision has to go through, I don't know, like maybe 4 or 5 different departments. So it's a very complex decision. And apart from that, I believe people from technology, you are more in touch with sports scientists, performance director. But my opinion, I wouldn't like to take any decision on my own, because I believe the sports scientist or performance director is like the director of an orchestra, not because we are super important, but it's because we are the only ones that don't make music. So we have to work for the people that you don't usually see. So we should translate their needs and not our needs. So I believe that decision shouldn't be made by us, even though you are in touch with us and not with them.
Okay. Okay, we got one more question. I want to make sure I leave time. Actually, 2 minutes left. Do you guys want to go into Q&A? You guys have any questions? I can pass the mic around. Any questions? Okay, let me just go and give you the mic.
Thanks, Julian. My name is Elliot Schwartz. I'm with the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. So clearly a lot of the issues of implementing tech and making decisions are people-based, obviously. I'm interested in the tech side of it. So when you bring in different applications and everyone has, I talked to Carlos about this earlier, like the Holy Grail is an athlete management system where you have one-stop shopping for all the data that anyone could want. But no technology implements the same, or no technology integrates in the same way with the data flow. So how do you manage that challenge of an AMS with all the different data sources you've got?
Thank you.
You can, more and more teams are building their own. So when it comes to creating, filling a need, then that's the way I would go. That's the way a lot of clubs have been going lately, which you have this starting platform, and then you customize it, the way you need it. Again, I think it's the way to go about it, to go back to my broken record of common language. you decide what exactly is your language because you are building the tool. And then back to Carlos was saying, this has to be well defined, well established, well discussed prior to making the decisions. That's the way to be efficient in my mind.
All right, thank you, Pierre.
Carlos?
I believe that a few years ago, all the clubs started to buy this AMS. But right now, no one's really using this AMS because they are not flexible enough for our very particular situations that we have. And as Pierre said, that we are all building our own systems to put all the information from your technology. So I believe that the ability to export it very easily is even more important than the dashboard itself because we are putting everything in a dashboard. So I would put as an example like ForceFrame. I love Valve, we work with Valve, but for example, ForceFrame is very difficult to export a good CSV in order to introduce the data in our dashboard. That would make me think about changing a technology, and it's something as basic as a CSV.
Yeah.
The API is a very good point. The API are an important part of the decision also when you choosing technology. My last word for the day would be, there's more and more in football. They have multi-property type of organization. Like organization that owns different clubs around the world. And it exists also in the US, where when I was at Toronto FC, they would own the Raptors, the Maple Leafs. So you get also some manpower behind this organization to build like multi-sports AMS, and that's pretty exciting, from the standpoint of the head of performance.
Any other questions before we wrap up? Nobody? Yeah.
So, thanks. This has been great so far. I have a question. My name is Scott Rio. I work with the Boston Red Sox. Question about developing your own bespoke solutions and technologies and going out and kind of working with someone to make you a specific product versus taking off the shelf products. I was wondering kind of if you had a comment on, do you do that, and kind of what guides your decisions on when you make an investment in a new product versus going with what's available?
Thanks, Carl.
Yeah, I mean that's what we do. I mean, I'm not talking on behalf of anyone. That's what that's the way it should be done. Meaning, Julien just said to start that we get bombarded, and yes, we get bombarded by a lot of different companies. But the best way to be successful is to go to this company and say, hey, we have this need. Do you have anything for me? And that's a little bit of what I was referring to when I mentioned Kagatech, because I went to my assistant and I said, we can do better. There's something we can do better. And he mentioned, being from Australia, I heard that guy in Australia. So that's how he went. And that company was really burgeoning at the time. It was the very beginning. And then they used our input. They used the input of other people they met in the meantime, and it came to their final product. And that's, in a perfect world, that's the way you go about things, because it guarantees success on both sides, in my mind.
Just, I guess, real quick to what he said. So when, this is about 10, probably more 15 years ago, we were looking for an AMS company to come in. We met with a bunch of them, but none of them kind of met our need type of thing, and that's kind of what he was asking as far as having it customized. And I think nowadays companies are starting to realize that each team or each individual needs it customized to them type of thing. So at the time we decided not to go with anybody, and we kind of built our own program in-house with just a quick Excel spreadsheet. And it was one of the things that we sat down and reacted, kind of like what he mentioned. Do we really need a whole AMS right now? Are we doing a lot of sports science? Are we tracking a lot? Do we need one? And at the time when we're starting, we're like, we don't need one right now, so we just started with some simple Excel spreadsheet. And then it became down to kind of the flow of communication, and then we kind of slowly built up on that. So it's not like, hey, do we need to start from the top, or can we start at the bottom? And then eventually, if there's a company that meets our need, then we can kind of go with them. So it's not always like I said, you don't always have to keep up with the Joneses.
And it's all way more time efficient, again, because if you don't really have the need, Massa was talking about onboarding, then we don't have to spend on onboarding because there's no really need on our end, Time is the essence for us, So,
just a quick one to add. So we've also been seeing over the last 5 years a transition away from off-the-shelf, the teams that we work with, off-the-shelf solutions to custom-built proprietary ones. But the thing that seems to be universally, like the common denominator, is that last export part. For example, in the beginning, they were fine just randomly, pulling JSONs, but now they want something more structured, more efficient, quick to use. So there has been some extra layer of customization. But for example, we've used webhooks, and now that's being very pervasive throughout at least the MLB teams that we work with, just to pull something simple like a CSV. So we were definitely seeing that trend. But then also, how do we help with that last mile to make it even more efficient and less painful?
Yeah, and I think that's a wrap. We don't have any time for more questions, but I want to thank the panelists today. So thank you guys.